Welcome everyone to another episode of This Crap Was on National Television. I'm Kirk Buchner, and I'm with my co-host Chris Bournea. Chris, sorry about Ohio State. I was cheering for you. I was looking for you in the stands.
Yeah, I wasn't there, but yeah, can't win them all, I guess.
Can't win them all, but we always can have Winnie, who's here with us again. Winnie the Mini Dad.
Hey, Winnie.
Hello. Just easier to hold her than let her just run around with squeaky toys.
Right.
I know that the show is called This Crap Was on National Television. Usually you and I take the piss out of everything, but we're having more fun this time. We're just playing a bit of nostalgia with the show that we both remembered quite a bit. Battle of the Network Stars. It was cheesy, campy fun.
Yeah, and it was like an era when stars didn't take themselves so seriously. It's weird because nowadays with social media, stars are supposed to be more accessible. But I just feel like I can't really see this happening. I couldn't see Battle of the Network Stars happening today, not the least of which is because there are so fewer network shows on. Well, but I just can't see, I don't know, name any given, can you even name a TV star that would be willing to, be willing to do like Field Day. I don't know if your school had Field Day, but.
Yeah, we had that. Yeah. Honestly, I can barely tell you network shows like yourself, right? I mean, I was thinking about this before we went on because you've got nephews and nieces, right?
Yeah, I have teenage nephews and nieces, and yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so I was just trying to picture because like my nieces and nephews are like they're like one digit, right? So like they wouldn't understand anything I would try to explain anyway. But I was thinking like, man, if Chris was to try to explain what the show that he just did to them. The first question they ask is, what's a network?
I think networks haven't completely died. So, I mean, they're aware of, here in the United States, they're aware of still the big three, CBS, ABC, and NBC. But I think they would be like, they wouldn't recognize people. They would be like, who's that? Because viewership is so fragmented across streaming channels and the few cable networks that are still, I don't even know if you could call it thriving. They just there's not that name recognition. So as where we all knew who Debbie Allen and Mark Harmon and Thelma Hopkins and Joan Collins and what was their name that played Daisy Duke, Catherine Bach. We all knew who those people were because of 80s mono and 70s monoculture. It's not that they wouldn't grasp the concept. They just wouldn't know who most of the people are unless they were on the particular shows that they watch.
Yeah. And these failed, the ones that were on failed shows that didn't last still have more eyeballs than a hit show today, which is crazy.
Yeah, a show that would be considered a flop, would get tens of millions of viewers, or at least 10 million viewers, which would be considered like a blockbuster today.
Right. Well, the one we picked was episode 12. So this was in 1982, and this was before I guess we go into this was a creation by Roone Arledge, who was the president of ABC Sports. And I don't know how much Howard Cosell came up with the idea, or if at all, but Howard Cosell, this was my idol as a kid, believe it or not. I wanted to be a sportscaster. And I looked at Howard Cosell. I thought, well, if this guy can do it, maybe I can do it. but then I chickened out. I never pursued a dream into this, but I guess I'm doing this in my own way later than never. So there you go. So we start off with a glam shot, and I'm thinking I didn't recognize who it was at first. And you hear the corny porn sax music, and it's Randy Oakes from
Yeah.
Chips. Did you watch Chips as a kid?
It's one of those shows that I knew was on, and I would catch, you know, bits and pieces of it every now and then. But I don't think I ever sat and watched an entire episode of Chips.
I probably watched tons of them, and I can't remember one.
Okay.
Yeah. So she was. I checked to see if she was one of those blonde models that sort of like had posters that were sold, and I guess it was. So some people had them. But she's surrounded by all the contestants, and it goes to, and then it cuts over to Cosell. But I hate the one thing I'll criticize them. I hated the way they just did a cold open, and they just went into the swimming relay because we did
Right.
intros later. So we'll do the intros after. So the swimming relay is just the way it sounds. It's just regular swim, just the regular front stroke. So ABC is represented by John James, Heather Thomas, John Davidson, Telma Hopkins, Douglas Barr, CBS, Robert Walden, Catherine Bach, Audrey Landers, Pernell Roberts, Brian Mitchell, NBC, Joe Piscopo, Nancy McKeon, Daniel J. Travanti, Christina Rains, and Mark Harmon. If some of you are wondering who the hell are these people, so was I, and I'm sure so was Chris.
Yeah, yeah. And I was also a bit confused because I thought Telma Hopkins at this point was on Give Me a Break, but I guess she was on Bosom Buddies.
So did I.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking. I didn't realize that ran like I guess a season and a half. So anyways, lap one, Piscopo and James are basically tied, and Heather Thomas, because they have all the women sort of going alternating laps. Heather Thomas of ABC takes the lead. John Davidson keeps the lead, but Christina Rains overtakes Selma Hopkins, who did not do particularly well. She would have better moments later on today. And but they're because they're doing some overdub. So this was all done in post production. So Cosell saying she might have left early because of course she did, and what happened here? So Harmon narrowly beats Douglas Barr. So we learned pretty quickly that Mark Harmon is pretty much the best athlete here. And he was, I knew he played football at UCLA. I didn't realize that he was a quarterback.
Oh, I didn't know that either.
Yeah. Incidentally, in the late 80s, he was named the sexiest man alive by People magazine. I don't know if you know this. He narrowly beat out me.
I actually saw Mark Harmon in person.
Oh.
When I was a newspaper reporter. I got to go to the Oprah Winfrey show, and I believe it was 97, and he was Oprah's guest that day.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So
he was, no offense to Mark Harmon, but he seemed as boring in person as he always seemed on TV.
I do.
But he's a great athlete.
I did like Summer School.
Yeah, I like Summer School.
Yeah. I think that might have been the highlight of his career. He never quite became the big superstar that a lot of people pegged him for. But what is he on?
Well, wasn't he on one of those NCIS shows?
I think he still is. I mean, it's one of those shows for. I mean, I think you and I are getting older, but I think it's for basically people my dad's age who fall asleep to these crime shows, and I think Family Guy even made fun of it where they just sort of like did a cutaway. It's like the stars of the shows. Okay, you can go to bed now. And then they just go back to the scene. I always get a kick out of the fact that I think there's two generations for LL Cool J. There's yours and I who remember him for going back to Cali and Mama Said Knock You Out. There's my dad who just knows him as the guy with the funny name in the show he likes.
Right. Yeah, I actually have an old school alarm clock that wakes up to the radio. And the other day I woke up to I Need Love by LL Cool J. It's just like rap was so G-rated when we were growing up. Well, most of it was. The stuff on the radio was.
Some of it's all, well, I'm going to sound too old when I just say that this whole mumble rap shit I don't understand.
Yeah,
whatever.
I literally don't understand it, like the words.
But we could go on and on about that. But anywho, so Cosell's on the screen with John Robinson, who is the commissioner, and he's the legit head coach of USC, which pretty big deal. And so the commissioner actually has a job, and he can say, well, Christina Rains, and you see the replay, and she did clearly jump, and it's a 2-second penalty, and ABC gets the win. Yay. And now so ABC is with 100 points, NBC 75, CBS 50, and now we finally get to meet the team. So Team ABC, William Shatner, I think that's why we picked this. That's why I think I pushed it, who is the star of TJ Hooker. Their show I couldn't stand.
Never saw it.
You missed nothing. You missed absolutely nothing. That was the only memories I have of that is when I used to have to stay with my grandparents, and when my parents would go out, and my grandfather loved TJ Hooker. And it's like,
didn't that have the two Heathers, like the Darren situation on Bewitched, like Heather Thomas and Heather Locklear? Or...
Not quite. This show would actually sometimes have the two Heathers, because both Locklear and Thomas did appear on Battle of the Network Stars, but Heather Locklear was on TJ Hooker. Heather Thomas was on Fall Guy.
Heather Thomas wasn't also on TJ Hooker?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't believe so. I'm pretty sure I'm right on that, but I mean, we'll let the commissioner decide.
Right.
So we get William Shatner, and then Douglas Barr, Fall Guy, another show that one I did watch a bit, and then I just thought, what? And then it became pretty obvious that here's a show about stuntmen, and then Lee Majors was always had obvious stuntmen taking his fights for him.
Yeah.
Joan Collins of Dynasty, I was thinking, okay, she wasn't the tabloid star yet that she was about to become.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I bet she's not too athletic. I would be proven right. Lydia Cornell, Too Close for Comfort, another show I barely remember. But I guess she was just sort of like the hot blonde who never really went anywhere, because it was the 80s. There was a lot of them.
Yeah, it was. I think Suzanne Summers was like the template for sitcoms, at least, of the sort of, like you said, the hot blonde staple character.
She didn't stand out. John Davidson of That's Incredible, which was what would you describe that show as if you ever watch it? Sort of like a news magazine slash reality.
It was a precursor to like today's talent show competitions, like America's Got Talent, combined with sort of a reality show.
Yeah, I mean, it was another show I remember. I know I watched a lot, but I couldn't remember anything. Thelma Hopkins of Bosom Buddies. Useless fact for you: when I was a kid, I thought her name was Orlando.
Oh, right.
Because I think I said that.
Tony, Orlando, and Dawn.
Yeah, Tony. There's Orlando and there's Dawn. So made sense to me. I mean, I knew which one Tony was. So anyway.
Well, Tony could be a woman, though.
Yeah, but I knew he was the lead singer.
Okay.
I went on a YouTube rabbit hole, and there was an old thing of them doing Knock 3 Times. Man, were they hot? Anyway, before I get too creepy, because
the only song I know of theirs is "Tie a Yellow Ribbon." I don't know any other Tony Orlando song.
Well, another thing that you've missed nothing. John James of Dynasty, and then Heather Thomas again of Fall Guy. CBS, Pernell Roberts, and I remember as a kid thinking, man, this guy's older than dirt. He's only 54, and he would turn out to be the late MVP, which we'll get to.
Yeah, interesting thing about Pernell Roberts is if he were just a shade browner, he is like a dead ringer for my father.
Oh, yeah?
I mean, they could be twin brothers. And I always thought, because of his name, as a kid, I was like, oh, is he black? And he's just one of those light-skinned people, because he looks so much like my father.
Yeah.
Pernell. I don't know many white guys named Pernell, but
it's a friend of mine who is half Japanese told me, this is when I was a kid, that Neil Sedaka was huge in Japan because they initially thought he was Japanese.
Sedaka, yeah.
But I don't know how true that was. A lot of people just get big in Japan. Catherine Bach of Dukes of Hazzard. A lot of people had their had her poster. I think my brother did. Danielle Brisebois of Archie Bunker's Place. Audrey Landers of Dallas. I don't remember her on Dallas.
Yeah, I do. It was she wasn't on very much, but I do remember her.
I only remember her in guest spots on Fantasy Island. We got to do one of those one day.
Oh yeah.
Brian Mitchell, I don't remember him, of Trapper John MD, but I never watched that show. Joan Van Ark of Knots Landing. I did eventually watch Dallas, but I never watched Knots Landing.
I caught parts of it. Again, never saw a whole episode.
Robert Walden of Lou Grant, another show I never watched, although I did get into old Mary Tyler Moore episodes. But I never did see a Lou Grant episode. And Tom Wopat of Dukes of Hazzard.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you and I, we both watched Dukes as kids, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Daniel J. Travanti is the captain of Hill Street Blues. Debbie Allen of Fame. I always thought she was much older because of the character she played on Fame.
You mean like kind of like a matriarch kind of character?
Yeah. So like I didn't realize she was only in her early 20s. I mean, it's not that she looked older. I just assumed she was because she was that powerful boss character.
Right.
Mark Harmon, Flamingo Road, never saw that show. Nancy McKeon, Facts of Life. Ah, yes. Not that long ago when Chris and I did that show with Gilligan's Island, we talked about the Ginger Marianne thing. I think for me, a lot in with my group, it was either Blair or Joe. For me, it was Tootie.
Yeah, I have to say, I know Nancy McKeon hasn't been like real keen, no pun intended, on the Facts of. I think she's been in a couple of the Facts of Life reunions, but she's aged very well, I have to say.
So, well, from what I can tell, they all have. Lisa Whelchel looks incredible. Yeah, she was in back in Survivor, and then one of those somebody did like those reboot just fun. They redid like a classic episode. With current actors, and Lisa Whelchel portrayed her. Still showed up in the Eastland uniform.
Oh,
and
wow.
She was trending on Twitter, and then it's like, and then you look at her, it's like, holy crap, 40 years? This is all she's aged?
Well, she's very, very Christian. She's sort of like Candace Cameron Bure, so maybe she's lived a very pure life. Like she hasn't drank or done drugs or.
I'm sure that certainly helped.
Yeah.
Or she's got incredible genetics.
Or she's a vampire. One of those.
She's a vampire. Love it. Joe Piscopo. Couldn't stand him. My favorite, I think I told you this, my favorite quote about Joe Piscopo was, Eddie Murphy's success is going to Joe Piscopo's head. Christina Rains, Flamingo Road, I never heard of her. And apparently I did read that she left acting like 4 or 5 years later, so whatever.
Okay.
Lynn Redgrave on a show called Teachers Only, never saw it, never heard of it.
I remember it.
Yeah.
It's just so interesting having a Redgrave, because I just think of her sister Vanessa as having so much gravitas. I could never see Vanessa Redgrave doing something like this.
Vanessa and Redgrave never had to do anything like this.
True, but even if let's say it was a charity event, I just can't see her doing anything that's not.
Oh, okay, all right. So here's something. Let's say they did this a few years ago. You and I, we've talked about Viola Davis. She was on a network show.
Yeah.
Would she do this?
I can't see it unless it was a charity event, which was, we can talk about the angle of each of them was their incentive was they would, on this Battle of the Network Stars, is they would get more money if they won a challenge. If they didn't say it was for charity like Celebrity Apprentice, they just said they would get more money. So unless it was a charity event, like some kind of telethon or something that wasn't televised, I can't see someone of Viola Davis's stature doing this. Also,
too, these people, they were getting paid. And I should mention the last member, Bruce White's of Hill Street Blues. And again, I was thinking about this. Like, if I never had kids except for my little dogs, and that's all I ever wanted. But if I was 20 and then all of a sudden I had a kid, and then maybe 20 years ago, and my 10-year-old says, I want to get into acting, I would discourage them completely. Because there's not a lot of openings. Now, it sure as hell, there's so many channels. I mean, I think now there's a lot more working actors, but a lot less stars.
Exactly. I agree with that.
Yeah. And I think it usually sort of shows up when we talk about the Oscars, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of people, or a lot of talented people winning. A lot of talented people don't even get nominated, but who are these people?
Yeah. And there's also, I think there's more roles, but there's less job security because the streaming shows, their seasons are so short, and there's like sometimes it seems like a year or more can go by between seasons, whereas the networks, it was very structured, September through May.
But that's if they got picked up. So when we look at some of these names,
yeah,
a lot of them never worked again.
Yeah.
Like on, or they never got a check like this. And I don't think this was in the days where they really figured out how to get paid for proper syndication yet.
Right.
Them. So, we'll come back to that later during the tug of war. And I think you might know where I'm going with that, where there's someone saying, well, too bad, so sad. But when they had to change a bit of a rule. But anyway, Cosell welcomes everyone to Pepperdine. It mentions that this pool will be the host of water polo in the 1984 Olympics. I hear that you guys did very well in that. It really helps when the communists don't show up. But anyway.
Right.
Yes. So he welcomes Randy Oakes with a montage of her past performances, which included Stevie Wonder singing "Isn't She Lovely?" One of the parts of the montage is, I guess, somebody rubbing her thigh. Mm-hmm. And then going slow motion in the dunk tank. It's the early 80s and sex sells. It would play both ways later on, but okay. Howard looks super creepy with his arms around Randy Oakes, and I wrote down, I'm sort of questioning my childhood hero. Because he was, the creepy old man vibes were through the roof here with this guy, huh?
Yeah, and I don't know the name of the other older man that was like the announcer for some of the competitions, but like the one where he kept asking women to kiss him. That
Simon Says, yeah. Oh my God. I should have sent you something. I didn't pre-watch this before we decided this. I should have went back and counted all the potential Me Too's.
Yeah. This would never fly.
Oh.
Yeah.
I had to take a shower after watching some of this. And
the women just had to, I don't know if they felt obligated to laugh and play along, or
I was going to ask.
It was like,
I don't know, or that's just how. Oh, that's just how it is.
Right.
Don't know, but it was awkward as all hell. They do say that the winners get 20,000. Going back to what you were saying about the cash, winners get 20,000, 15 for second, 10 for third. So 20,000 in today's. I looked up the inflation calculator. That's basically 60,000. That's a nice change for people who probably it's like. For some of them, that's pretty big money.
Yeah. And I would imagine this didn't take any, I mean, I'm sure they were told they maybe did some, you think they did training for this, or they just kind of showed up on the day of?
They said that they were practicing.
Okay.
So, they mentioned a few things about that. So I guess so. And I'm sure some people maybe, like Mark Harmon probably didn't feel like he had to.
Right.
But yeah, I think they did practice somewhat because some of them had never done that. And we did see an injury in practice, but I don't think they showed up the day of.
Okay.
But I don't know for sure. So our second event's the kayak. So we're starting with Joan Van Ark, CBS, Lynn Redgrave, NBC, John Davidson, ABC. And I wrote down, this is where Cosell is amazing because in post, right, he's making this seem like this is a competition between great athletes. The negotiation of the boy, and he makes it sound as good as a touchdown pass.
Yeah.
I don't know any other person who could do that then or now as well as him. Maybe Al Michaels. Maybe. And I don't even know. Davidson gets through first. As we see Lydia Cornell struggles. Debbie Allen takes over the lead for NBC. Danielle Brisebois, who was only 12. From Archie Bunker's Place, another show I didn't bother watching.
Yeah, that was like one season, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, once he was just the bar owner, it wasn't all that interesting. So
Right.
Let's see. White's now sort of leading that for NBC, extends the lead. Pernell Roberts, all 220 pounds of him, and he's in his white Speedos that I wrote looked like a diaper. Because it just wasn't a good look, as opposed to how good bathing suits look on me and my trapezoid body, but oh well. Mark Harmon is the NBC anchor. He takes a huge lead, and it's pretty much already over. Shatner falls down as he's the anchor, but he sort of like falls into the pool, can't get into the kayak. I wrote down that I wonder how his toupee is hanging on, and also
Exactly.
George Takei somewhere laughing.
Yeah, George Takei was laughing that Shatner even had to do that show.
Wow. Or he was also bitter too, because George Takei his hatred towards Shatner. Okay, I get it, but let it go already. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't really know. I knew that they were feuding. I don't know what it's about.
Well, from what I understand, and Star Trek geeks just I don't know. I know I'm named after Star Trek, but which I told you that, right?
Oh, you are literally?
Oh, I literally. Oh, I never told you this. Yeah, yeah.
Oh.
Because my older brother is a big Trekkie, and my dad is a drunk.
Okay.
So he just kept pushing for Kirk, and that's why I'm named that.
Wow.
That's literally, yeah, I'm named after William Shatner. I told my wife that when we started dating about 20 years ago, and Star Trek wasn't big in Indonesia. That's where my wife's from. So when she moved here, and I met her 5 years after she moved to Canada, and so she didn't know what Captain Kirk was. So I described the actor and then brought him up on the internet, and couldn't do it on the phone because we couldn't do it back then. But and she looks at him and she says, "Why are you named after the Priceline guy?" Because that's what. Yeah.
So she didn't even know Boston Legal. Wasn't he on Boston Legal at that point?
She never saw that.
Okay.
It wasn't a show she watched. So like she just knew him for those Priceline commercials. And later on and she wasn't watching 30 Rock either. 30 Rock, or not 30 Rock, Third Rock from the Sun. Or he would later do that. Shatner was brilliant the way he, in his mid 80s, just changed his whole career. And Takei eventually too, which is why I'm thinking,
right.
Why are you so bitter still? But anyway, Takei just basically said that Shatner was an asshole to work with, which is probably true. And it was a scene stealer, which we know is true. They didn't get along on set, but I guess there's just a whole lot of bitterness. And I'm sure there was a lot of other things too. Maybe he was also bitter that he couldn't be himself. I mean, George didn't come out till he was a senior citizen.
Right.
So, and then he had that second life through social media and the Howard Stern show. And now he's probably more beloved than any other Star Trek cast member. Not more known, but more beloved.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like,
right.
You're living the life. You know, like for you, life began at 65. Why are you still so angry? Because he was all pissed off making fun of Shatner because he got to go in space.
Oh, right.
And making fun of Shatner's weight. Like, okay, yeah, but he's guy's 91 and he's doing this. I'll be blunt. We all want to see the captain go up in space, not Sulu. You weren't the same guy. But anyway, I'm just speaking for me.
Well, I think all of us who are fans of whatever pop culture, whether it's a TV show or a movie or band, we all want to think that they get along and all have the same fond feelings for each other that we do. And that's, they're human just like anyone else. There's feuds, there's people who rub each other the wrong way. I mean, I understand what you're saying about why make it so public, but at the same time, if you feel like you're being authentic and you're constantly asked about someone, I mean, unless you just say no comment.
That's true too. But sometimes Takei will bring up his comments without being provoked.
Okay.
Saying that though, I mean, like I'm sure he's asked that all the time anyway. But whatever. The editors do Shatner no favor because they're already interviewing Harmon and the winning team while Shatner's still trying to finish. But anyway, NBC's in the lead, 175, ABC 150, CBS 125. Then they do these bits for 2 minutes. Cosell's doing a bit on Daniel J. Travanti. I could care less. Apparently, he was a former alcoholic. Three on the next event's 3-on-3 football, but it was all a montage, so we couldn't really see much of anything. I found it interesting that Harmon, they said it was not fair for him to play quarterback, so he didn't. So they did show him dropping a ball that he probably should have caught. But again, Cosell's calling it like Monday Night Football. ABC versus CBS in the finals. ABC wins. So now ABC's got the lead 250, NBC 225, CBS 200. Now it's a bit on Shatner. Shatner is interviewed about being a great team captain, even though he's probably the least athletic man there. And then Joan Collins shows up and just is crediting Shatner for everything, that how they won flag football, even though Shatner sucked. Whatever. And now we get the piece on Shatner, and he talks about his classical acting training and his work in Stratford. That's what we should do. We should that'd be fun. I haven't been to Stratford in a long, long time. I think I saw.
I've never been.
Never? Okay. That's only like it'd be only a 5-hour drive for you.
You're talking about Stratford there's a Stratford in Canada, or Stratford in...
Oh, you don't know that? Yeah, Stratford, Ontario.
No, I was thinking about Stratford, England.
No, Stratford, Ontario. I mean, like, so like that. It's a lot of Canadian actors cut their teeth there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Something new every day.
Yeah, so like that they basically they do Shakespeare like all year round at all sorts of plays.
Okay.
Yeah. So they talk about his work there in Stratford, Canada, or Stratford, Canada, eh? Hamlet, eh? No. I was trying to come up with wherefore out thou, Romeo. Now, all right, I'm sorry, that shtick's getting bad. So then he talks about how Captain Kirk has the look of eagles, and he thinks nobly. But he had to unlearn his classical training to play TJ Hooker. And then they show a clip of him hanging onto the car, but it's his face, but it's somebody else's body. Oh my god! They didn't even try with the stuntmen to make them look like the real people back then, did they?
No.
It was good enough. And then they do okay. Next thing is the baseball dunk, which is usually sort of like it's a bit of the TNA, because you're seeing the women wet, but you're also seeing the men in speedo. So I guess it's equal opportunity. But you're also, I think, to your point earlier, Chris, you're seeing their personalities come out. They're just having fun with each other. They're not worried. At least I don't think they are. I don't think they're worried about what they're gonna say or how social media is gonna like look at them for this. They're not worried about being can't. They're just having a good time.
Right. No one had phones that could be recorded when you don't know you're being recorded.
Right. Yeah. So they were just having fun. Joan Van Ark picks Travanti. The girls in the crowd are going nuts for Daniel J. Travanti. All right, fine. Because they shot this in front of I guess like 1,000 people or 500 people who got to watch it. It should have been fun for them, I think, right?
Right.
So anyway, they're bantering to each other, and what happened? Yeah, she dunked him a couple times, and then afterwards they give each other a kiss. Like, again, I don't know. I'm not a touchy feely person, so whatever. Catherine Fox.
Also, it goes back to the Me Too thing. I don't know that. That the actresses seem perfectly comfortable with the men coming up and like actually kissing them on the lips. I don't know how well that would go over today. Even if they were, if they were good friends, sure. But if it's somebody who's just an acquaintance coming up and making a joke and then kissing you on the lips, I don't know. I don't think that would go over well.
Did you see the Keanu Reeves thing where he got praised a couple years ago when all the Me Too stuff was happening, and then everyone was showing a montage of pictures of girls who would take pictures with Keanu Reeves, and Keanu would always have his arms up so that he wasn't even touching them.
Okay.
Like there would be either he just didn't want to be creepy or just wanted no doubt or anything like that. And Yeah, it's like in Barbados, right? I won beer. I won a 6-pack of beer. We're shopping at this place because they were just asking random people, and then I set up a post for their social media with this one girl, and I'm lining up with 6 other people with my 6-pack of Heineken, and so I'm the only one not touching her because I just don't want to be that guy. Granted, they're far more touchy feely in the Caribbean than still, but that's a story for another time. Anyway, Catherine Bach picks Doug Barr. So they kissy. She goes to kiss him right before he's distracted and presses the dunk for her. So, hey, she's obviously having fun with it. She dunks him twice anyway with the ball legit and gets another kiss. Bobby Walden picks Heather Thomas, and Cosell says, I would do the same. Ew. He dunks her twice, and many young men were happy. I don't know how this happened. Randy Oakes is now in the tank, and Pernell Roberts is throwing, and Howard says, good thing she wore a swimsuit, and she gets dunked twice, and then he gets a kiss from her. Joan Collins picks Catherine Bach, and then Howard gets all creepy again. Gets the first one. I didn't think she had a throw like that in her. And that's when Cosell said, well, they were practicing before, and apparently Catherine taught her how to throw. And then the third pitch went exactly the way I thought Joan Collins would throw, where it hit the ground first. So she regressed, but good on her. Piscopo picks John James, and he's doing his shtick the whole time. I couldn't stand Joe Piscopo. Douchebag. Sorry. Never liked Joe Piscopo. Dunks him on the third. Whoever uploaded this, I wrote down because they I guess there was a bit where because Cosell says he also does a mean Frank Sinatra, and then he cut out. Whoever uploaded this didn't record it because it wasn't there. You just see a brief thing of him in the Sinatra wig, and then it goes right back to the.
Well, maybe they got a notice from YouTube that they had to cut because maybe he was singing a copyrighted song.
That could be, or he didn't like Piscopo.
Yeah, I tend to believe that Frank Sinatra's estate is no joke.
That's yeah. Actually, I suppose if there's any estate to be afraid of with the certain ties they may have, it might be Sinatra. Okay, so then we go. Christina Rains picks Thelma Hopkins. She's cold, and then Travanti says, "Hey, she's black and blue."
Yeah, definitely would not. You could not say that today. And I think didn't she say something like "Yo mama" or something?
Yeah, yeah. In the words of my ancestors, "Yo mama." Well, the
And
crowd.
then he comes up and kisses her, right?
Oh yeah, I couldn't. Yeah, yes. I don't know if we're overly sensitive now, or I don't know. Either way, it was 2022 eyes. Like,
yeah.
I think it was also too more comfortable that was the biggest laugh of the night from the crowd.
Yeah, I even saw Debbie Allen laughing. I thought I saw Debbie Allen laughing. So
she might have. I don't recall, but whatever. Then it cuts to commercials. I don't know if we lost something, but the new standings has a 3-way tie at 300. So now we got the obstacle course, and they didn't show much for the women's, but they mentioned that only 2 advanced, so they all had to do prelims. And Cosell basically says all the women stunk, and we have a montage of all the women doing badly. But the average time apparently was 35:58, and putting in perspective, Randy Oakes's from last year was around 24. So I guess they weren't doing particularly well then. But we don't find out which 2 advance. Instead, we go to men's prelims where John James destroys Tom Wopat, Mark Harmon defeats Bobby Walden. So we know that it's going to be Harmon versus James and Allen versus Hopkins. Hey, did you ever watch? I know we talked Dallas. Did you ever watch Dynasty?
No, another one where I knew that all the moments that went viral, so to speak, that were always on clips that were always on Entertainment Tonight of Crystal and Alexis rolling around in the fountain or whatever, or whatever it was, swimming pool or fountain, pulling each other's hair.
Yep.
And the Moldavia massacre, but I never actually sat and watched an episode.
I did watch that back then, admittedly, and the Moldavia massacre. It was with one of those jump the shark moments, because after that, then nobody died but minor characters. It was like, screw it. Like, where do you go from here?
Right.
You know, after you do a mass shooting where everyone looks dead, but then they all wake up 4 months later. Anyway, that was also the era of those cliffhangers too, which also doesn't,
Yeah.
or not very well anyway. Let's see. So, but we show in practice that Debbie Allen took, holy crap, she took a fall. I don't know how she got up from it. So she just lost her footing, knees banged on the ramp going up to the monkey bars, chest first, right in the bottom. Like that was nasty. But she came back and she beats Telma easily. And they did show the score from before in qualifying. Telma actually had a much better time than Debbie Allen did. So I guess a bit of an upset. But,
Yeah.
so yeah, but you know, the way they edit it, they're putting on like the classic underdog story. You know, the only thing they didn't do correctly is you have to play up more that Telma had a much better time. You play that up more. You make Debbie the underdog more. And then the post interview, Howard is gushing and gives a big smooch to Debbie. James versus Harmon. James is nervous, probably because he knows that he's going to get destroyed. He's not destroyed, but he loses to Mark Harmon. And then his dad is there, and I did not know this. Mark Harmon's dad is a former football player himself, and a damn good one at that. He won the Heisman.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so a guy named Tom Harmon, I wasn't familiar with him, but he actually is a pretty big deal. So he was not just the 1940 Heisman winner. He played for the Rams for a couple of years, but he was one of the first athletes to transition into a successful broadcasting career.
Oh, wow.
I did not know that. So good on him. Then we get the Simon Says. I forgot that they did this. This was awful. I was creeped out by this whole thing.
Yeah.
My first thought was, I'll get so the guy who does it, a guy named Lou Goldstein. I never heard of him, but I found his obituary, and apparently this was his shtick. And I'll give him credit. He was great at this. This might play in. They said he was like doing this in the Borscht Belt.
Okay.
So and I'm
You
sure
know, when it came across that kind of way, like a old time lounge act
yeah,
kind
and
of vibe.
apparently it was.
Yeah.
And my first thought was like, who the hell fails at Simon Says? But he did it really well, and he had some of these people fooled, and it was entertaining, but also super creepy. And
Yeah. Well, again, looking at it with 2022 eyes, definitely was creepy.
I don't know how we didn't think so then. Well, granted, we were kids then, but still, man, I wish my mom was still alive. I would have had her watch this, and then I know what she would have been creeped out. But yeah, so Catherine Bach gets eliminated, and she gets to kiss her way back in, and he pretty much says, "No, you got to do it on the lips." And to put for those just listening, Lou Goldstein looks like a guy named Lou Goldstein would look like.
He's not a handsome, or was not a handsome man.
No, he looks like a used car salesman. He's definitely got a toupee going on too.
Yeah,
You know,
for sure.
When you think of these Borscht Belt things, you think of somebody like him. It's like what Billy Crystal played in Mr. Saturday Night. You know, if you ever saw that movie, and if you didn't, you didn't miss anything. The third time I've said this line today. But she gets to continue. Then later on gets a big kiss from Debbie, and I wrote down this guy's the biggest pervert. Then he's got them. He has, and Simon Says he's got Bruce White's now embracing Nancy McKeon. So I looked up how old Nancy McKeon was at this time. Now Bruce White's was 39.
Oh,
Nancy McKeon was 15.
wow.
And to get them in an embrace, he had said basically, well, Simon Says, "Are you single?" And you have to answer, and they were both single. So he had them, and maybe that works with like you're putting sexual tension between a 39-year-old man and a 15-year-old girl. What the hell are you doing?
Yeah, that's gross.
It was completely gross. I don't even know who won this because it seemed to be a tie as both Pernella, it came down to Pernell Roberts and Debbie Allen. Both seemed to be eliminated. at the same time. And then he gets another kiss again. And then Randy Oakes flips the script and he goes into the dunk tank. Notice he didn't go in the head because he didn't want his toupee to flop up. Like, Jesus, this was awful. And again, this guy was probably entertaining if he could have toned down the creep factor. But in 1982, you could get away with that, I suppose. And no one looked offended.
Yeah, the thing is like someone like Rodney Dangerfield was so over the top that it was just like, oh, that's crazy Rodney. But this guy was just like, he didn't have that charisma that Rodney Dangerfield
Rodney
had.
never forced himself on women on stage.
No, not that I know of.
Something went viral again a couple weeks ago because Gina Davis, and I actually remember watching it. So it was a Gina Davis interview on Arsenio Hall with Bill Murray.
Oh, when they were in Quick Change?
Yeah, yeah. So Bill Murray's being super creepy, even like pulling down her spaghetti strap dress and just it was, and she's got to laugh that off. And she talked about that recently, just like a couple weeks ago. And just
yeah, because she wrote an autobiography where she talks about
right, yeah. So like that was sort of like part of that, and she just didn't know what to do. She's frozen at that moment. She can't do anything. And like there's everyone just sort of laughing. Well, it's just Bill being Bill, just men being men. And as much as sometimes I think maybe we're going overboard with the toxic masculinity, then I see stuff like this, and then I realize why this happened.
Right. It's like the pendulum was all the way over that, to one side when, this era of Battle of the Network Stars. So the pendulum has to swing the other way in order to find a happy medium.
Exactly. Yeah.
Or the center, I guess.
Yeah. And this was, anyway, what do we got here? Okay. Then they just do a montage of the tandem bicycle. So there's really no footage. All we know is NBC won, and they're pretty much they get to go into the tug of war automatically. So it's there's one event left. ABC and CBS tied at 425 with the running relay. Basically, ABC and CBS, whoever wins between those two, it doesn't matter what happens to NBC, we'll move on to the final. So it's 6 legs. And Travanti gives NBC a small lead. Debbie Allen adds to it. Piscopo keeps it, but John Davidson of ABC takes over for second. Joan gives up that immediately to Audrey Landers of CBS. Christina Raines keeps the lead, and Mark Harmon runs the anchor. And it's Howard says there's no way anyone will ever catch him, and no one did. John James had the lead over Tom Wopat, and then but Wopat was able to just hang on. Sorry, no, Wopat had the lead over John James for CBS. And then we have our controversy for the tug of war, which is the final event. It's supposed to be 3 men, 2 women, and you can't exceed over 800 pounds. And ABC is way over. And you see Christina Raines saying, well, I don't care. Rules are rules. Probably someone who needs that extra $5,000.
Yeah.
So the issue apparently is Bobby Walden, the Lou Grant actor, he's injured and he can't compete. Burnell says, look, we'll just have the women go. I think he just wants to get drunk because he says, let's just go have a drink. He looks like someone who probably drank hard. He looks like somebody that if we were to say, go back in time and say, hey, we can drink with any one of these guys, I'm picking Pernell Roberts because I know he's going to pick the best whiskey. Stuff really? That I've seen before. Well, maybe he's not. I don't know.
The doctor, the surgeon is the one.
Oh, please, Chris. Okay, I know you didn't watch MASH, but if you ever did, like half the time, Hawkeye would be sued because he was drunk. He was like, okay, incoming, wounded, and then he puts down his martini and he goes into the operating room.
Wow, I didn't watch MASH unless I happened to unfortunately be in a waiting room somewhere. It was playing on. Like Ice Cube said, I've watched 2 episodes of MASH.
I don't think there's an episode I haven't seen 5 times.
But. Quick aside. Yeah. My mom and my sister and I saw the movie Devotion over the weekend about the Korean fighter pilot, and we were talking about that era. And I said, "Oh, MASH was set during the Korean War, wasn't it?" And my mom actually thought it was. I think she thought it was set during Vietnam. And I was like, Mom, no, they just made no effort to make it look like the 50s. It was, made in the 70s. But
it was just interesting that I was a child when MASH was on. She was a fully grown adult, obviously, and she didn't know that it was set during the Korean War, or had forgotten it, I guess.
Well, they weren't. Yeah, to your point, yeah, they didn't try very hard. Uh, to sort of like do that. I mean, they didn't try to even have even from the start, even from episode one.
Yeah.
They made no effort for that. MASH did a lot of things great, but in terms of I saw the same actors over and over. If you were an Asian actor in Hollywood, you're hoping to get that MASH role.
Was Pat Morita on MASH?
Yes, he was. He was on there for a couple episodes. One of the few actually played an American.
Okay. Huh.
Or did he? Well, he did. He didn't have an accent. I know that. He spoke with his regular voice.
Okay.
Now I'm trying to think. I mean, because they made it that he understood Korean in one episode, but I pretty. Obviously he doesn't because he's Japanese, but I don't know. But yeah, no, you'd see the same actors over and over and over again playing different roles. Well, whatever. I mean, that's how it was, I guess. Okay, so they agree that okay, they're gonna have three women instead. That's CBS, and Howard says they've got no chance. And as soon as he says that, I'm thinking, okay, well, I know this is in post, so this is going to be a lot more competitive than I thought, and it was.
Yeah.
Long story short, the CBS team with three women won.
Yeah.
And if this was in Hollywood, you would think, okay, you'd think they faked it. They didn't. You cannot fake the grunts and the shaking of the legs,
Yeah.
especially with Travanti. And so then you think, well, how the hell could they have won when you've got Mark Harmon on one team, who is I think we can agree is the best athlete. The best female athlete was on their team too, and Debbie Allen.
Uh-huh.
So how did they lose? And basically, it came down to Pernell Roberts and Travanti, who were the anchors.
Oh yeah.
Pernell is a beast. He's got those thick legs, and he's farther back, and you've got the four people in front of him. So he's playing anchor perfectly. The NBC team is lined up almost by rows, and then at one point, Travanti's on his back, just hanging on. They're not digging in as deep. I mean, you don't think of tug of war strategy, but there was. And one team did implored it, whether they knew it or not, and the other team didn't.
Right.
And that was really the story. But Cosell makes it a different story. It's about women's liberation, and this is the proof. So women are equal, but I'm going to treat them all as objects, and I'm going to kiss every single one of them I can.
Including Randy again. Including Randy again when they were doing their wrap.
Okay. I wrote down, okay, so right at the end, he says, well, actually before here, I went too far. Before the tug of war, he has Randaroo, why don't you go interview them? And so Pernell says it's a great day for women's lib, and I wrote down because I didn't know who won this, so I just wrote down. I think he's just thinking of whiskey. The three women are spouting gibberish. They think they're going to lose. Tom Wopat thinks they're going to lose. Says I don't even want to talk about it. And the NBC team is all cocky. And frankly, I would be too. If the other team looked unconfident, I know I've got an advantage, but it wasn't. And this went 9 minutes, 32 seconds, they said. The one scene that'll always sort of stick with me the most is Travanti's legs. You can't, there's no, the ghost of Laurence Olivier could not replicate this. Like, there's no fakeness at all. Like, this was great. The tug of war, in my opinion, Chris, should be an Olympic event, and it used to be.
It did.
Yeah, the tug of war is awesome. I don't know who would win if they brought something like that back. Probably, but I mean, think of the teams you could put together, like a great American team, Russian team, a Bulgarian team, because they're full of powerlifters. Iran is full of great weightlifters. I mean, it would be epic. And
yeah, so I guess apparently
for tug of war, that's interesting. Like it's more about lower body strength or like overall like mass than it is like someone like Mark Harmon, who's more like more lean muscle mass.
Well, that too, and I just was looking mostly at their positions. I mean, I'm no kinesthesiologist, is that the word? But I mean, it's just Purnell was dug in and Travanti wasn't. Travanti cost them,
Okay.
in my opinion, because Travanti didn't have all that. And just look at Purnell, he's just squat down like Buddha, and he's not budging. He won't budge. And Wopat had great positioning, and the other, well, they were kind of mostly there, but they were all dug in too.
Right.
So they weren't going to move. So
Right.
Purnell was obviously way stronger than I thought he was. So I mean, he won it for that team. So anyway, so CBS wins. Cosell sells it like Al Michaels did the Miracle on Ice when the U.S. defeated the Soviet Union in 1980. But then we go right to the credits. So bad opening, bad close. Because the credits are rolling as he says, I've seen $1 million athletes not expend this type of energy. We see the rope burns on Travanti. Cosell says they were outwomaned, and Randy, who I think is drunk at this point, because she was slurring. Isn't that the story of life, Howard? Maybe I'm wrong, but it sure sounded like she was a little out of it. And Howard is drooling over Randy Oakes, and he goes in for the kiss, just like, but she's into it. I mean, like, I guess you felt that you had to.
Yeah, because she's like, "Oh, Howard."
Yes. Ah. 3 years ago, no, 6 years ago, someone who worked for me, she's Filipino, and there was this part. I was working in a small town in Jasper, right? So it was a party for her 18-year-old daughter, and apparently they do like a big thing, and part of it is where all the men have to dance with the daughter. And I said to my friend, I'm not going up there. I barely met your daughter. I'm not gonna close dance with her. It'd be creepy old. I was one of the few who wouldn't do it. But like,
Okay.
and she's like, no, go up there. Like, no, I'm not. I'm here for you. I barely know her.
Right.
I feel flattered that you invited me to this thing. It's like one of those in the small town. So it's in the town, like Legion Hall and all that stuff. It's like, no,
Yeah.
I don't want to make her feel uncomfortable, let alone make myself feel uncomfortable.
Right.
Like,
Right.
oh, keep me out of this. It closes with the local news report that the United Kingdom was about to bomb Argentina. That didn't happen. And then it also says how Ed Asner was fired. I didn't know what he was fired from. Apparently, it was from the Screen Actors Guild because he was supporting the El Salvadorian Marxist rebels.
Interesting.
I did not know that. I did not know that he was an activist. So I was looking through his obituaries. I was not aware of Ed Asner's activism. Think about that now, Chris, that in 1982, for having a left wing position, you could get pretty much ousted from the SAG.
I didn't know that SAG took any kind of positions one way or the other.
I didn't either.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like with Charlton Heston wasn't happy. If anyone wasn't going to be happy back then, you figure it's going to be Heston. But
yeah, which is interesting because Heston was involved in the civil rights movement. If I have that correct. So he's, pardon?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so he's one where he went from like, I don't know. He I don't know if he changed ideology or just became more conservative as he got older or what happened.
Okay, we're so polarizing, right? So you can be, I don't see why you can't be pro-gun and pro-civil rights.
Well, in America, in the current state of politics, the Republican Party is seen as pro-gun, and they're definitely not seen as pro-civil rights.
No, but
so I'm not saying they're always mutually exclusive, and certainly back in the day, like you said, you could be more, you could have one position on one issue and a different position on a different issue, but they're definitely not seen as, guns and civil rights are definitely not seen as like, oh yes, those are the same ideological kind of issues.
That's a great thing to learn about Heston, because I did not see that coming. I hope that's true. Usually I ask you whose fault this is, so I'm not going to ask you that because we both kind of enjoyed this for the camp that it was. So I'm going to ask you, who was your MVP if you're the sports writer, and who's your LVP?
LVP would probably, I guess I'd have to say Joan Collins,
Yeah.
because she just had that one lucky throw, and then it just seemed like you said, she didn't know what she was doing. MVP, I'd have to say Debbie Allen. I was just, when they were showing her little montage,
Yeah, I forgot about that. Holy crap!
yeah, I just was so amazed at how fluid her body was when
Yeah.
she was in front of the she was in the dance studio in front of the mirror. I mean, it was like she had no joints. It was like she was like a reed flowing in the wind. I was just so it's not surprising to me that she ended up winning so many competitions.
I think yeah. So for me, I agree with you on LVP. I'm giving Purnell my MVP just because he won the big thing at the end.
Yeah,
Mark Harmon's clearly the best athlete there, but Purnell, he won that tug of war. I don't want to say almost single handedly, but about as close as you can.
yeah.
Uh, and maybe I'm just because I'm reaching the age he is now. Let's hear it for the old guy. So I was also looking at going back to I wrote these notes and then I forgot to bring it up. Debbie Allen. So here's the thing. So if you would have said like in 1982, here's all these people, who's going to be the most successful in terms of credits? It's probably we wouldn't have picked Debbie Allen, but if you look at everything she's done, writer, producer, director, actor, she was in the Kennedy Center honors just a couple years ago.
Yeah, I have to disagree. I don't know that I had the insight at 82. I would have been 10 years old. I mean, I wouldn't have had the insight to have to,
Well,
I
I
would have
wouldn't
said,
have.
"Oh,
I just
Joe
said I
from the
wouldn't have
Facts of
picked her.
Life, she's going to be a big star." You know,
I,
I didn't have the insight at 10 years old. But Debbie Allen, I've always known,
yeah.
and maybe it's because, a cultural thing. I've always known that she was very ambitious.
Mhm.
Like she said, if you want fame, you got to pay. And right here, right here is where you start paying and sweat. I mean, she just always seemed so driven and so ambitious. So it doesn't surprise me at all that
But it
she's
would have
gone
been,
on to have the
yeah.
career
Okay, I guess
she's
for me,
had.
I don't think a lot of people would have. Uh, but then who's this? Like, you wouldn't have thought Shatner would still be kicking it around as he still is. You would have looked at Mark Harmon. Mark Harmon should have been a bigger star. John James, the way he looked, how is he not a bigger star?
Right.
But because that back then, that a lot of that stuff mattered. I mean, it still
Yeah.
does, but more so then than now. Uh, yeah, this was probably the most fun we'll have. Before we went on, I gave Chris an idea of what I've got in mind, which won't be as fun, but it'll be quick. But we'll see. I won't say what it is in case you say I'm not doing this because that's
Yeah.
happened before.
Well, yeah, it's not fair to tantalize the audience, but yeah, I do want to like check it out first. So there's a little tease to
Mhm.
see if we end up in verbal fisticuffs. There's a word you don't hear every day over this show.
I if you say no, I'm just gonna say okay, and I'll come up with something else. It won't bother me that much. It's just something I stumbled across. I don't even know why, uh, but there it was, and oh crap! I remember reading that this was like one of the worst shows ever. Never watched it.
Yes, audience, just guess what you think it may be.
There's so many possibilities.
Yeah. One thing I wasn't able to find much background information about Battle of the Network Stars other than the years that it aired. I just wanted to know, like, was this a contractual thing? Like certain networks on certain shows, they said, okay, in order to be hired, you have to appear on Battle of the Networks, especially ABC, since it was or was it just like they just put out an open call, whoever was game for it, no pun intended.
I would think so because none of them looked coerced to be there.
Right.
It's a chance to make some extra money, have some fun, and I'm sure nobody was contractually obligated to be there except for Howard.
Right. And that's back when Wide World of Sports was huge on ABC.
Yeah.
So I don't know that there's definitely, I don't know of any network equivalent that shows different kinds of sports. It's not just football or just.
Well, they needed that back then because that didn't exist. We were talking. We brought that show up before. That's where I watch most of my Globetrotters.
Right.
Yeah, and so you'd see the same skier sort of like fall like 1,000 times. The agony of defeat. Bah, bah, bah.
Yeah. Now, as we were saying, everything is so fragmented. There's no program that has a little bit of everything on a network.
But there's no need to. I mean, you can get anything you want. I mean, you would have told me when I was a kid that I could watch every single hockey game I wanted to, not just have to wait for like that one time every 2 weeks when they'd show my team. That didn't happen. So no, it's way better now in some ways, but it's less special. Sort of the same thing with stars, right? More, uh, more working athletes, less big people.
Yeah.
But with that, I know you've got to head out soon, so I'm just going to do my plugs. If you haven't checked out Chris's documentary, please do. That's Lady Wrestler, and you can check that out on Amazon.
Thank you.
Yeah, so please do. That's about just do a quick synopsis if you could.
Yeah, so it's about the Black women who integrated pro wrestling in the 50s, hidden figures of wrestling.
Yes, that's perfect. I've never heard you describe it that way, but that's the perfect.
That was actually a headline in the Washington Post. They picked up an Associated Press article about it, and that was the headline.
Yeah. Hidden
figures of wrestling.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Well, my book was not featured on Washington Post.
But it should be, though. It should be.
I appreciate that. It's about the late, great Chavo Guerrero Sr., instant classic. You can get that also on Amazon. Hey, you can buy both. Look at that. At the same time. What a great Christmas gift that would be.
Yeah, we should have thought of a Cyber Monday or Black Friday deal.
We should have.
Yeah.
No, we were too busy coming up with crappy TV things to watch. Or mostly I came up with things and I just said, hey, Chris, watch this.
This was a nice nostalgia trip, though. Battle of the Network Stars.
It was a lot of fun. Speaking of other nostalgia trips, next week I'm going to be recording another show. It looks like with the Cyndi Lauper Hall of Fame crew. There are a bunch of people who are pushing for Cyndi to be in the Hall of Fame. So we're going to look at her 2 number ones, True Colors and Time After Time. On how the hell did this go number 1? I've got my weekly show with Evan Nolan where we look at Hall of Fame news. And I'm starting 3 other new shows soon because I don't have enough to do. So I'll tell you about one of them really quick. So me and a friend of mine, we're just going to look at when athletes try to sing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So and so a bit of a spoiler here on that. Shaquille O'Neal, we probably won't even get to because compared to a lot of the ones I found, he's actually not too bad.
Wow.
Yeah. I'll leave it at that. So with that, wherever you are, wherever you may be, stay safe, everybody.